Everybody with Angela Williamson is made possible by Fireheart Pictures and viewers like you. Thank you. On July 24th, 2020, during one of the most uncertain times in our world, a station in Los Angeles launched a new interview show focusing on diversity in the arts, entertainment, and people. Created by Ty Woodson and Bill Rogers, the show would be called Everybody with Angela Williamson. After 5 seasons, it's time for us to share our story. Tonight, we talk with the producer and director of our show and bring back one of our most requested guests. I'm so happy you're joining us.
From Los Angeles, this is KLCS PBS. Welcome to Everybody with Angela Williamson, an innovation, arts, education, and public affairs program. Everybody with Angela Williamson is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you. And now your host, Dr. Angela Williamson.
Ty Woodson is our first guest. Ty, thank you so much for doing this. I know I put you on the spot. Congratulations,
yes, I'm used
friend.
to it. Congratulations on 5 seasons.
I know. So when you started creating the show, and there's more than one show on KLCS, and we'll get to that in a minute, but when you created the show, did you see us getting to 5 seasons?
Oh, absolutely. I knew right away it was going to be a success. But like most shows, we had to, we had growing pains, and we jumped in with whatever we had. The crew here was fantastic. Went out in the field a couple times, told some great stories, bring people into the studio, tell some better stories. Here we are 5 seasons later and, trying to win awards and so Emmy season, so hopefully we get nominated.
It's already been submitted, so fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, and it's so interesting because in that first season, I think we were just trying to fill where we wanted to go, but it made a difference with some of those first guests that we have, which is why we brought one back. What do you think is important when why we need to tell these stories?
When I first got hired at KLCS, the one thing that I told them that I wanted to bring to the station was to be hyper local. I wanted to tell LA stories, people who live here, people who work here, people who, make art here. We get enough of what's going on in the rest of the country, but as a PBS station, I believe it's our duty to tell our story and give our audience, our Los Angeles audience, a hyper local view of what's going on in their backyard.
And I like that you're saying hyper local, because even though we are hyper local, we actually, LA is so huge. We have so many things going on in Los Angeles and so many wonderful community organizations, so many people doing phenomenal things just within the community. Do you see how the show has evolved to tell a much deeper and enriching part of those stories?
Absolutely. Getting to 5 seasons, I think, helps any television series, because we could tell people's stories, but when we bring them back, in season 4 and season 5 and hopefully season 10, you can, and the audience follows along, you kind of grow with them.
Well, and you talk about telling these stories and growing not only with the people that we interview, but the show growing as well. I think that's what PBS does well.
Absolutely.
I look at a show on PBS and I watch it grow, and I feel like I should be writing them a holiday card, because they become part of my family.
Absolutely.
And we don't see a lot of that anymore. We have streaming, which is wonderful. We have ways of seeing all types of different types of shows. But I think the one thing that PBS does well is that we really hone in on those stories and we make each person we interview a part of the PBS family.
Yeah, I think a lot of that in commercial television gets lost because they're so worried about their sponsors, and they're so worried about being commercial. Whereas the freedom of being a PBS station, they're our sponsors. The audience is our sponsors. They're the ones who are responsible too. We get a lot more freedom being a PBS station.
And we do get a lot of different perspectives. So with
Yes.
that being said, we go into season 5 and we're bringing back, I said, one of our most requested guests, so Stan Freese is coming back.
Yeah.
And he's going to tell us about the book that he told us about season 1 that he was writing and now he's done.
Right.
But we have some other great shows happening this season as well. So want to talk a little bit about them?
Sure. I got football fans might be interested in watching the show with Quincy Carter, the former Dallas Cowboy quarterback.
Yeah, but he's not the only NFL player we have too. Right. We have Reggie Berry.
That's right.
Too. And I forgot we had 2. We have 2 this season.
2 former NFL quarterbacks, so that's great stories.
But then also too, we really hone in on arts this season.
Yes,
what do you think?
Absolutely. We got to spread the love with music with Aaron Akins.
Oh, we have the hula ladies.
Oh yeah, from Laguna Beach.
Yeah, everybody gets to learn how to do the hula this season. I love that one.
What we'd really like people to do is go to our contact page and let us know what you would like to see. Give us some more story ideas if you have any ideas. And please, please, please become a sustaining member if you can.
Yes. Well, and support, because when they support our show, they're supporting the community and we're getting more stories out there.
Right.
But I would love to hear what our viewers would like to see. They may know someone that has this incredible story that needs to be told, and we would love to hear more about that. So before we wrap up our talk, everybody with Angela Williamson is only one of several shows that we have here on KLCS that we need to talk about these other shows because they've been doing so phenomenal. So let's talk about them.
All right. So another show that I'm working on is called Sustaining Us, which airs right before the show on Wednesday nights, and it also airs on Mondays. It's all about sustainability, and you would be surprised to see what sustainability is in these days. It's not just water, air. It's human beings. It's money. It's banking. It's finance. It's
well, and that's why that show is so relevant, and I think that's why it has such a unique take on it, because when people think sustainability, they just think about water, air, and land, but there's so much more there, and it's really in depth because you have David Nazar.
Yeah, the infamous David Nazar is the host.
What would we say? Multiple Golden Mike winner.
Absolutely.
Yeah, superstar.
Super talented journalist, multi Golden Mike winner. So yeah, tune in for him and his storytelling.
But we also got another one, our infant to the program, but still a powerhouse. What's that show?
So south of Los Angeles, people would know a little county called Orange County, which is the 6th largest county in the country, but is not being represented in any media.
We are pretty much covering Los Angeles County, Orange County. Our viewers don't need to leave this station.
Never. Please don't turn the channel. Just stay on this channel 24 hours a day, and we'll entertain you.
And also support PBS Television, KLCS. Thank you. Of
course. The 5 more seasons.
5 more seasons. And come back to hear from one of our most requested guests and learn about a new book he mentioned on our show in season 1.
The challenges our planet's animals are facing sometimes feel a bit heavy.
The animals haven't eaten in a day, 2 days. They haven't drank anything. They're cold. They're dehydrated.
But remember, there's good happening right now. At home.
All right, we were able to get into your unit, and we have all 4 of your cats. So,
okay. And around the world for any animal, any disaster. Search ifa.org/disaster ready.
Welcome back. I love when our viewers tell me about their favorite guest, and there's a long list. However, this guest is mentioned the most, and people ask me about the book he mentioned in our first season. I'm happy to bring back Stan Freese and his friend Scott Wolf to discuss Music, Mayhem, and the Mouse. Thank you so much for coming back, friend.
Yeah, thank you. This is fun.
And this is the first time that you're seeing the actual physical copy of this book.
Isn't that great?
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal book. We talked a little bit about some parts of it in the first season we'll probably end up talking a lot more in depth now, but there's other parts of this book too that really give us the full life of Stan. I mean, the luck of the Freese, right? So you know we're going to come to that.
Okay.
We have to come to that.
All right.
But before we do that, you brought a friend, because we're all about friends on this show. So tell us about your friend.
Scott?
Yeah.
Oh, Scott is a Disney historian, you know, and so he's been, we used to go to Scott when we would have questions about certain things, you know, call Scott up, and we just got to know each other over the years. So he's the one that wrote this book.
Well, it's Stan's story and it's Stan's words, so I don't like to take that credit. It's really Stan's, but we had a lot of fun putting it together, getting all stories.
And there's something that I find with everybody that has ever worked for Disney, you're the most humble people I've ever met. I mean, you think that's just Disney attracts those types of people, or, I mean, or do you?
Listen, I got a lot to be humble about.
Yeah. I know after reading the book, I understand, brother. Yes, you.
Yeah.
But I mean, just wonderful. I mean, that you have someone that's
Yes.
a resource. And I mean, how does a person become a Disney historian?
Well,
Go.
I could give you my story, and it's kind of funny.
30 words or
I
less.
kind of like to say Disney archaeologist. Someone called me that because I know with the Red Watch, he's always coordinating everything.
Yeah, right.
But I worked for Disney. I started in TV animation, and in 1988, when I started, a lot of people who worked with Walt Disney were still coming to the studio. So now it's about 17 or 18 years ago, I started interviewing them and just capturing their story. So I can't like name just every date like that, but I'm all about capturing the story. And that's how, at one point when I was doing that, I said, I need your story, Stan. And I started getting his interview. He was still working for Disney at the time, so he'd tell me stories and he would say, this isn't for the public yet, when I retire. And that's now all in there.
Yeah, right.
Now, yes, and it's so entertaining. And in fact, when I was reading the book, at first, I thought, wow, Stan reached out to all these people and they wrote letters. But then when I started reading, I realized that's where Scott comes in and that you interviewed all of these people. And in fact, we can actually go to a website right now and listen to these interviews. What's that website?
Well, I have mouseclubhouse.com. It's really a link to not only the interviews, but now I'm doing YouTube videos, and I have one that stands in all about the Disneyland Band as well. So it's little clips from the interviews, and then I like artifacts. I brought some Stan artifacts too today.
Well, and you know what? Great way to segue to what we want to do right now, okay? So we're going to do a show and tell. And then I do have some questions based on the book. I don't know if we'll get to all of it, but maybe we can take this to YouTube and finish it up. Okay, first one here.
You're right, Disney World. So I was the first leader of the Disney World Band when we opened in 1971.
Right there.
Yeah, right there. So, so that's the album, and it's fun.
Stan Freese.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So
Was this your idea to record an album? Because that takes a lot of work. And
No, that was
look
the
at all of
company's.
these songs.
that was the company's idea. Yeah, Disney World wanted to.
So at the time, I could go to Disney World and I could go into the shop and buy this album and take it home with me.
Yep. Yep. Wow. Yeah, I know. Fun.
I mean, you are all celebrities.
Yeah, right.
I mean, amazing, amazing. So I have it says the official album of Disneyland Walt Disney World. So it seems like one time you were at both.
Right. Well, no.
No?
Well, kind of.
Kind of.
Yeah. So once I came back to Disneyland, they still needed me to go down there and do things at Disney World. So I would just leave the park for 2 or 3 weeks, go back down there again.
Wow. But you did this for quite some time.
Yeah. 46 years.
Now the album, it's songs from Disneyland and Walt Disney World. I think this one was their first official album. That was mine when I was a kid, actually, the same one. You took out the bookmark, but let me show you.
Yes.
May I borrow the bookmark?
Yes, I guess.
So in
I'll let you have
here,
it.
you'll see that, now this is the Disneyland Band, so that's Disney World Band.
Yes.
And this has a track from the Disneyland Band, and once again, here's Stan.
Oh.
The interesting story with this is the track that they used is actually the Disney World Band, even though they said it's the Disneyland Band. But by this time, Stan was leading the Disneyland Band, but they used a track off that album, so it's still Stan leading the band on this official album.
Oh, wow. And so at the time, you as a parent could buy this and get the
Yeah.
cassette. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe some of our audience might remember this.
I know.
And you could sing along with this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The words are in there and everything.
It was like the karaoke before karaoke.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay, and then this.
So, okay, this is these
$2.99?
from 1994. Well, no, this was the show. There may be an ad on the back, but
Yes.
this was free. They would give it out at Disneyland. I save everything. And what I love about this is inside, it refers to Stanford Freeze and the Disneyland I think it's the Stanford Freeze and the Disneyland Big Swing Band. Now, Stan had been directing the Disneyland band, but by this point he was hiring the talent for Disneyland already, although you took over their first Disneyland big band.
Right.
Right? At Carnation, largely, Carnation Place Gardens.
I read about this in the book, and it was so fascinating because I was telling my husband, I said, people used to go just for date night, and
yeah.
you talked about some really interesting dancers. So give me one story about one, there were several couples, but tell me about one couple.
Oh, boy.
Rose and
Debbie.
You got to tell about that.
Yeah. Rose and Debbie were from Chicago. And they loved to dance, and they were in their 70s, and they would come out and dance every night out there, and they would really dance too. So, and Rose, I would have my back to the audience leading the band, and if she thought the tempo was wrong, she'd just come right up, yank on the back of my coat, about pull me off the stage and tell me that it's too fast, it's too slow, but she was wonderful.
And I'm glad you told that story because that was the one that resonated with me. Also, too, because didn't she used to be professional dancer, or
Yeah.
weren't they professional dancers?
Yep.
And that's amazing. I mean,
In Chicago.
we had so much talent just in the guest alone, and you tell those stories so eloquently. So thank
Oh,
you.
good, thank you.
It's so wonderful. Okay, so we're going to continue our show and tell. Okay.
All right.
Okay. So, Mr. Taptoe.
Well, what this
This
is
is a news article, right?
right, and Lawrence Welk, for anyone who doesn't know, was very popular. He had a show where he led his own champagne band, they called it, with bubbles and everything, and they had dancers. He started a new show where they would bring on new talent, and he had a 14-year-old tuba player as the special guest. It says it at the bottom, and that was Stan at the time. Was that the first time you were on TV, right?
Yeah.
When you were on Lawrence Welk.
Yep.
And your dad took you.
Yeah.
You flew to California.
Yeah.
And you flew back. And what happened to Dad?
Oh, yes. There was a funeral down in southern Iowa. So we had to get down there, and my dad was not feeling well. So I was 14 years old, and I drove the car all the way down to southern Iowa. Sober.
I'm happy at 14.
Yeah, right.
Oh, wow. So that's the great memory. I mean, just the stories within the stories in this
Yeah.
book. So here's our other one.
Well, now that's just a wide shot, and then I just went close.
this
But
one.
that other document you have is related, the one just below that. That's the original show rundown of when Stan was on the Lawrence Welk Show. The Welk Company gave that to me. And what's really neat, there's a couple guests I want to point out that Stan was on the show with.
Please.
One of them, I never thought, what are the odds? I wasn't even born yet, and yet I know two of the people. One is Cubby O'Brien.
Yes.
He was one of the original Mouseketeers. It was Cubby and Karen were the two little kids on the
right
show.
here.
And then the other one is Pete Fountain, a legendary clarinet player. Now, Stan, you could take over because that was the first time you met Pete Fountain, wasn't
Right.
it?
He's from New Orleans.
Yes.
And so Pete would march into Mardi Gras every year, naturally, with his band. And so he invited me to come down, and I used to march into Mardi Gras with Pete Fountain's band, which is fun, except you're carrying a big tuba. That wasn't so much fun.
Yes. But you're in Mardi Gras. So,
Yeah, Mardi
wow.
Gras. Oh, that was wild. It was wild.
So what you're trying to tell me, Scott, is by the early days, by 14,
Yeah.
Stanford, well, I'm going to say Stan. I know they call you Stanford, but I love Stan. Stan's destiny was already set for the mouse because he was already moving in those circles.
Isn't that something? Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Your book, we talked about different parts of the book in our first interview, but there are so many other things that I was able to pick up too when I read your book. And there's this quote, and I'm going to try to read it without crying because it made me cry the first time. And it's towards the end, and you say this, and this is just a great way to sum up how you looked at life as well. The mouse gave me dignity when I felt I had no dignity left.
Yep.
I mean,
so do you want to know a little bit about that?
Yes, please.
Well, I had a problem with alcohol, a real problem with alcohol. Well, I didn't think I did. Everybody else did. No, you know, when I got sober and went into rehab, the fact that I worked at Disney kind of gave me just a little bit, the people that I was in there with, that interested them, you know. And I just thought, you know, here I am down, really down on everything. And like my roommate was a bank robber. That impressed me. He'd robbed 6 banks. I love that. You know, he's my hero right off the bat. So that's what that's about.
Well, and what's amazing is that even after you move through probably the darkest time of your life, but your outlook and how you've helped so many other people. So I actually have another question for you as well. You are really responsible for helping a lot of women
Right.
to Disneyland and play in the bands. And so my question to you is, why did you feel gender equality was important in the music industry? Because you talk about that.
Yeah, and there, you know what, there just weren't a lot. And Disney didn't have a lot of instrumentalists, women. And my own mom was a pretty good example. You know, she was the captain of the girls' basketball team at Drake University, you know, and she was a go-getter, man. You didn't want to mess with her. So I kind of got my respect for what women could do from my mom. And I just always thought, you know what, there's all these great lady musicians. I'm going to make them leaders, the ones that deserve to be leaders,
Yes.
you know. And so that worked out great for me, and it made me look good.
Well, and also too, they were phenomenal interviews. So now I'm going to transition to Scott, because a lot of those interviews, it was actually in that chapter. And I mean, a lot of them won Grammys. They became successful in their career, leaders of their band. I think at one point, one of the women you brought forth and gave her a job, she had one of your sons as part of her band as well, if I remember that too. So how did you feel listening to all of these stories and capturing these interviews? Because that's what you do.
Well, you know what, Angela? I think it's similar to you. I love learning about people. It's just so much fun to learn people's stories. And so for those people in Stan's book, it was a lot of fun to be able to capture their stories. Some of the stories in there, I had already interviewed some of the people, but Stan chose his real shining stars for this one. And it was a real treat for me to learn their story. Now, Stan didn't tell you, you performed with the Mariachi Divas on their Grammy-winning album. Stan plays the tuba with them.
Oh, wow.
Well, it was, yeah, Cindy Shea is this wonderful trumpet player, girl that I had at Disney. So as a favor to me, she said, hey, you want to do our album? And so I said, yeah. So I went over and played on their album, and then that became a Grammy-nominated album, you know, so.
And then she ended up winning a Grammy.
Yes.
I don't know which album, whether
But
it was
she
that
has
one,
won
but she has
since.
actually won. Yeah.
But I mean, just to hear how you were just the front runner of making sure of equality is just wonderful, especially in a business that's very competitive, and it needed to transition and change, and you just saw it and you got it done. And that's really the theme, and I don't know, you can chime in too, Scott, but this is a theme I see with this book, is you saw things and you were always like this big picture thinker, and then you actually got it done. I mean, how difficult was that? Because you're dealing with executives at the time. Now, you did talk about Sonny Anderson, but and how he was a mentor to you. But how difficult was that? Because you're a big thinker.
Well, you know what? It wasn't as hard as you might think, because it was something new for these people. So when I introduced the fact that I wanted to make so-and-so a leader, or have a whole band of girls, you know, I put that whole Mariachi Diva thing with Cindy together. And, you know, it was just, everybody kind of accepted it, going, hey, this is kind of cool. So it wasn't a battle for me at all.
Oh, I love that.
Now, Sonny was wonderful, and it was Stan's mentor. And I got to know Sonny at the end and get his stories as well. Sonny, didn't he perform with Pete Fountain in the Mardi Gras? Both of you were
so
there.
did I, yeah.
The other thing that's interesting is Stan, if I'm correct, you were the first one to bring some women into the Disneyland band. I believe they were subs at first.
Yes.
Because, you know, women wouldn't be in a marching band.
I love how he was sneaky that way. He's like, oh, somebody's out, I'll bring a woman to cover. I love it.
Yeah,
and
all
there's
I
a
had
lot
to
of
figure out
challenges,
is
right?
where they were going to change clothes, because they couldn't change clothes in the dressing room
that,
with the
yes.
guys. So that was my big challenge, is finding a place for them to change clothes.
Well, believe it or not, we are almost done with our time today. If you could tell our audience one key takeaway that you would love for them to take away from this book, what would it be?
Probably the respect in the entertainment world for women. You know, it's a big deal for me. That's it. So, and I take that from my mom.
Before we close, I wanted to actually take this book. There was something that your son said in this book that I think sums you up and how I feel. Because when we started this show, we were doing it under COVID, and you had never met me before. So I could almost feel these words that Jason says. Whenever my dad sees someone who he believes needs help, it doesn't matter what they look like, what religion they are, what color their skin is. My dad just likes to help those in need. And then he adds, look at his dog. She's got 3 legs.
Her name's Trio.
Because I could always count on the Freese family to make me laugh and cry at the same time. But I just put, it just sums up Stan. So, Stan, I mean, in the first episode, it was just it was wonderful. But to read this book, it just sums up the way that you've been through your entire life. And I cannot wait to see what's next for Stan and Scott together.
Yeah, totally.
As you start to publicize this book. You know you always have a friend on the show.
Great.
So thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And it's such a pleasure to meet you, Scott.
It's a pleasure to meet you, too.
Yes, next project we'll have to bring you on too and talk a little bit more about that too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And also to thank your beautiful wives too.
Oh, yeah.
I know without
thank you.
them,
Totally.
we wouldn't have the men we have here. So.
They're both
Thank
out
you,
there.
ladies. And thank you for joining us on Everybody with Angela Williamson. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for supporting us from the very beginning. Viewers like you make this show possible. Join us on social media to continue this conversation. Good night and stay well.